Hey guys, this is Joshua, aka Future Filmmaker 3940 Reviews, where we talk film, TV, and music. And here's another voiceover ranking for you guys. I figured since, the Infinity Saga era of the MCU is over, why don't I stop and rank all 23 movies of this Thanos era, the Infinity Saga? So it's time to once again rank the MCU movies from my least favorite to my favorite. Where will Captain Marvel, Avengers, Endgame, and Far From Home end up? It's time to rank them from the worst to the best, and let's find that out right now. Let's get something out of the way right now. None of these movies I hate at all. Just like I like some of them more than the others, but I love them all equally. And most of the ranking has changed in a couple places. And this is my personal ranking, so this list is not going to go the way you think. So if you have a problem with the ranking, you can go and make your own list. But as of now, here's mine. Be sure to comment down below. It's going to get controversial, but it's good to get some controversy. So let's get into it. Coming in 23rd place is Thor Ragnarok. Now let's get this straight. Thor Ragnarok is a really good entry into the MCU, and while it might be my least favorite of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and my least favorite of the Thor trilogy, soon to be quadrilogy. This movie has grown on me quite a lot since I first watched it back in November 2017, which when I first saw it, I thought it was disappointing and okay at best. But I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. I appreciate the story more of Thor having to save his kingdom with Hulk's help. The main female character, Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson, is a nice addition to a long list of MCU female characters and MCU heroes, and she was a very awesome female badass. The music by Mark Mothersbaugh is really entertaining, and especially the soundtrack is really well crafted on the music supervisor's part. I thought bringing Hulk into the mix actually worked pretty well, and you have some great banter between Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo, and they both does a really great job. Hela was a pretty awesome villain, and in my opinion one of the more underrated villains, and Cate Blanchett did a really great job in that role. The action sequences are a lot of fun, especially the Thor-Hulk gladiator-like fight, which I didn't care for at first, but the more times I watch this movie, the more I come to appreciate a lot of things in this movie. The direction by Taika Waititi, while it took some getting used to, I really appreciate the more I watch it, and I'm down to see him return for another MCU movie, which is what we're getting. The issues that I have are still pretty much present for me. Is that I wish Lady Sif was in the film, but again, I understand what was going on there. If Jamie Alexander nearly died during the production of Thor Dark World, I completely understand the reasoning for her not being there. There's no Jane or Dulcie, which is disappointing, but what can you do? The main issues here are, at times, the comedy does distract from most of the film's dramatic and darkness moments, especially since Ragnarok is supposed to be a big threat. But because you do expect this one to be a lot darker in tone, but at times the overload of comedy does really mess with the tone of most of the film's dramatic and emotional moments. Anthony Hopkins as Odin doesn't really get a lot to do here. Speaking of Ragnarok, you don't see him until the last couple minutes in the big action scene, so the title of the movie alone is misleading. And yes, I still really don't care for the Grandmaster, even though Jeff Goldblum gives a really good performance, but he's more annoying, unlikable, and selfish the more times I watch this movie. And I wish that the Grandmaster would just go ahead and be killed off. Because if this is the kind of villain, hopefully in the new era of the MCU he'll be more tolerable. Otherwise, I still think they should kill him off. Because if this is the kind of villain we're going to be seeing in the MCU there, that I don't see how we're going to get another great villain that's just as great as Thanos. Maybe until Galactus and Doctor Doom at some points. But that doesn't change the fact that Thor Ragnarok is a great MCU film. Just not one of the absolute best films out there. Number 22 is Thor. Of all the movies on this MCU list, and won't be the only one, Thor is a film that I truly find to be very overlooked and underrated. Yes, I feel exactly that way. What the movie did was take a character that nobody really cared about, like Thor, and made him into something more. Chris Hemsworth was the perfect choice for the role of Thor, and I don't see anyone else being casted in this role. Hemsworth plays Thor in a very ruthless and rebellious manner, at least in this movie, but also has his moments of humor and charm and charisma to him, and he always has the manly voice to match it. Kenneth Branagh's direction is very well solid, and the visual style here is really impressive here. The stuff on Earth is just as interesting as the stuff in Asgard. I do enjoy the love story with Hemsworth and Natalie Portman as Jane. I do buy the romance with those two together in the scenes they do share together. And Kat Dennings as Darcy doesn't annoy me, and she still doesn't annoy me looking back in this movie. And seeing Thor having his powers taken from him and banished to Earth and him trying to change his ways was a very interesting story. And the rest of the cast is really great too, from Idris Elba to Rene Russo. Jamie Alexander is Lady Sif. She doesn't get that much to do, but she's really awesome here still. My biggest issue with Thor is the Dutch camera angles. It reminds me a little too much of Battlefield Earth, and some of the explanatory dialogue at points. And it does hold this movie back from being higher, but all in all, Thor to me is still the best film in the Thor trilogy or quadrilogy, and still one of the more underrated films in this long-running franchise. 21st place, we have Iron Man 2. So when I first saw this back in 2010, I loved this movie a lot. And yes, I still like this movie a lot. But looking back at Iron Man 2, the movie definitely does have a lot of problems. It does suffer from a lot of Avengers setup, especially Nick Fury and Natasha Romanoff and Black Widow and setting up from S.H.I.E.L.D. And it does turn the whole situation of Tony's alcohol problem into a bit of a joke. And yes, Whiplash is not the most interesting MCU villain, which those problems alone definitely does change my view on this film just a little bit. Justin Theroux was very underused, and Tony is a bit unlikable here, but not to the point where he's so unlikable I don't give a crap about him. And some of the humor does hurt the film. But there's still a lot of really great moments in here. Robert Downey Jr. is still really awesome in the role as Tony and Iron Man. Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts still really impressive. As much as I think Whiplash is one of the weaker villains, Mickey Rourke did a fantastic job. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow was a really cool introduction, and so was Samuel L. Jackson, and Black Widow does have a pretty cool action sequence. I personally think Don Cheadle is better than Terrence Howard as Rhodey. And the rest of the action sequences, especially that final action sequence of Iron Man and War Machine fighting off Whiplash, is a lot of fun. Jon Favreau still really directs the heck out of this movie, and you have a nice soundtrack from AC/DC and a very underrated MCU score composed by John Debney. And some of the humor is really funny at times, and the new Iron Man suit for the film is really fun. I can understand the hate for this one, but this definitely has some things that holds it back from being the worst thing ever created. Number 20 is Thor: The Dark World. Now, when it comes to this movie, I didn't see this one until 2014 and haven't rewatched it ever since. The second Thor movie is enjoyable, but there is a lot of issues here. The story could have easily really been awesome, and there are moments where the story has potential, but it doesn't really feel entirely executed very well. Darcy's assistant definitely becomes a lot more annoying at times. Some of the comedy feels out of place in the wrong moments. The villain, Malekith, despite Christopher Mark Eccleston's good performance, and he does try, the villain itself looks cool, but not very interesting, and the scenes with Selvig nude on the street easily could have been cut out. But for the bad things, there's still a lot of great things here. The opening sequence is really well done. Alan Taylor does a decent job at direction. The scenes with Jane and Thor aren't too bad, and the chemistry between Hemsworth and Portman is once again awesome. Loki, aka Tom Hiddleston, is really fun to watch. There's a lot of scenes with comedy that I don't really mind, and the music is very well done by Carter Burwell. The cinematography is definitely well done, and the stuff that happens on Asgard with Thor and Jane, the other Asgardians are really well done. Jamie Alexander once again does a good job as Sif, but she's very underutilized and doesn't get that much to do, which disappointed me back when I first saw it, and it disappoints even now. But at the end of the day, it's not one of the most memorable ones in the MCU, but it's still really entertaining despite its glaring flaws. Number 19, Captain America, the First Avenger. Captain America the First Avenger was definitely a big surprise and a nice introduction to America's hero in the case of Captain America. And a lot of people have kind of forgotten about this movie because of the sequels that will follow on after this film and the first Avengers movie released back in 2012. But for me, this is another one of those underrated / overlooked movies. Chris Evans was the perfect choice to play Captain America. And right from the start of the film, you see the determination and the passion that he puts into wanting to be a part of the World War. Tommy Lee Jones was really great as well. Stanley Tucci, Sebastian Stan, Neil McDonough, and Derek Luke were really great in their roles as well. I almost forget Antoine Fisher himself was in this movie. Derek Luke, who he played Antoine Fisher. You get it? And how can I not talk about how sexy and badass Haley Atwell's Peggy Carter is? I seriously think she's an MCU female character that is a badass that can hold her own. And it's a shame that Haley Atwell hasn't gotten much more roles outside this movie because I think Haley Atwell is a pretty great actress. Hugo Weaving as Red Skull, definitely one of my favorite villains of the MCU and definitely one of the most underrated MCU villains of the bunch. And he is amazing in this movie. I never understood why they didn't get him back for Infinity War Endgame, but it doesn't matter anyway. The musical numbers, some people say it's cheesy. In some ways, it kind of is, but it is really fun to watch. And the montage of Captain America saving people was really fantastic to see. Alan Silvestri's score really comes into play for a character in this entire movie, and I bought the romance between Steve and Peggy, and it was very sad when they don't get to share their dance together until Endgame, but it was worth the wait. Joe Johnston's direction and the script by Christopher Marcus works together really well. However, the only sort of nitpick that I do have is the second half does kind of drag a lot, and it doesn't feel as much epic as the first act and satisfying third act. And I have to give a round of applause for the filmmakers and Marvel for putting a little advertisement for the Avengers after the credits because that was really awesome. Alan Silvestri's score is still really great in the credits as well, especially the theme he gets for Steve Rogers' Captain America. And the first hour of the movie is so really well done, telling Steve's origin and Red Skull and his scheme is really fun to watch as well. So all in all, Captain America the First Avenger is such an underrated MCU film, and honestly it's the most misunderstood and the black sheep of the entire trilogy of Captain America films. It's very awesome from start to finish with a great origin story for Captain America and great direction and well done screenwriting and a great villain in the case of Red Skull. So this film is really entertaining. Number 18, we have The Incredible Hulk. This is one of the more underrated ones here. A lot of people just do not like this movie at all, and I don't understand why. Yes, I will agree the one criticism with this movie is the villain, Tim Roth. Could have been a lot better. He could have been so much better, but he's not the worst villain ever. Have you looked at the Grandmaster? He's a terrible side villain. But anyways, that ain't what this is about. Edward Norton is still really great. I really still enjoy the cast and Liv Tyler, and I like what they were going for here. They were going for something that was very well done and it was very well emotionalized. But I really do enjoy that part of the movie. I like what they wanted to do here. It definitely does suffer a little bit in terms of some of the writing and in most of the film's direction, but The Incredible Hulk is still nevertheless a really good movie. Now, that leads me into number 17. So number 17, we have Doctor Strange. Whew, this is the one. This is the one movie that I was not anticipating at all. Even from the trailers, I was just against this movie. I was like, what? Then this movie took a while to grow on me, but I let it grow on me. And the reason why I let it grow on me is because I wanted to appreciate this. It was a different character that no one's seen before, and I was very happy that we got this movie. This movie was actually solid. It was good. It was badass. It had a great origin story. Only problem is that it did take a while to get used to the whole trippy stuff. But my personal problem is Tilda Swinton, and there's not a lot of action going on, which is one of the big nitpicks, but I get it was trying to tell a story, and that's what I really do appreciate in Doctor Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch is a fantastic lead. He is perfect as the character. Scott Derrickson's direction. This has some of the best MCU effects and pretty cool, entertaining end fight. And Rachel McAdams, I hope she gets a lot more to do in the sequel because she was really great in this movie as well. So I gotta say, this movie was good. And Doctor Strange is definitely one of 2016's more overlooked films. And I can't wait to see what they do with the sequel with him and Scarlet Witch, because that is going to be a hell of a fun movie. Coming in number 16 is Avengers Infinity War Part 1. Now, this was the one that could have easily been convoluted and too much going on for it, and too many characters put into one. But what the Russos managed to do was take all the characters from the first 19 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, fit them into one film to face off against our big bad, who you get a clear motivation on why he does what he does. You don't get a lot of backstory with him, but that was kind of the point. You didn't need a whole lot of backstory with Thanos because we've been setting him up for 10 years now. And you didn't really need all that. So, I gotta say, they did their job. This has a very emotional story. It has a very emotional punch to it in terms of the film's ending, which I've grown to accept, even though I don't love the ending like everyone else does. It still pretty much pisses me off. But if it did succeed in giving me the little post-credit scene with Captain Marvel, which was set up. Captain Marvel in Endgame in this movie this year. And the cast and the direction is really great. A lot of great things in this movie. Even though I still think Loki should have stayed dead. I'm looking forward to seeing how his series is going to be. But all in all, Avengers Infinity War Part 1, there's not a whole lot more I can say. But I'm curious to see how this is going to end up on the Marvel ranking. Because I do have it written down, I just haven't shot it yet. So, be on the lookout for that in 2020. Coming in 15th place is Black Panther. I know a lot of people just do not give a crap for this movie at all. They say it's overrated, they say it's this and it's that. But you know what? Screw that noise. Black Panther was the movie that we needed, and it was the first black superhero movie that we have gotten in a long time. Not counting Blade, I'm not counting Hancock. This movie deserved this Academy Awards acclaim this year. It deserved all the praise and all the money. It was worth it. It told a good story of a king having to make the choice to take over his kingdom after his father is killed. Killmonger was a very intimidating villain in the case of Michael B. Jordan, who was amazing in this movie. The only problem I don't like with him or another character, in the case of Ulysses Claw, is the way they go out. That could have been done a lot better. But hopefully Black Panther 2, they bring Michael B. Jordan back, because something tells me we're not done with Killmonger yet. We still have a long way to go with Killmonger, and we will be getting more Killmonger. But Chadwick Boseman was absolutely great as T'Challa. Lupita Nyong'o was great. Danai Gurira was great. Letitia Wright. All of the actors was great. Forrest Whitaker, Daniel Kaluuya. The action sequences were great. I love the score and the soundtrack. It's hip-hop oriented. The second one being Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But everything about this movie set right with me. I did have some nitpicks when I first watched it, but the nitpicks is completely gone away after rewatch, because this is a great movie, and I can't wait to own this in my Blu-ray collection. So, yeah, I gotta say, Black Panther, number 15. Coming in 14th place is the one that started it all, and that is Iron Man. Iron Man was such a great start to the MCU. Without this, you wouldn't be having all these movies. The superhero world craze would not be as big as it is. There wouldn't be a lot of cinematic universes like the Monsterverse or the DC Cinematic Universe or the DC Black Label. Without all that, without this movie, you wouldn't have the Marvel Cinematic Universe itself. But what we got was a really great film, a great start to the film, and another great comeback to Robert Downey Jr.'s career. If this flopped, Robert Downey Jr.'s career would be gone. He wouldn't be Sherlock Holmes. He wouldn't have any other projects. But this movie definitely proved that he is a great actor, and Jon Favreau is a great director. I love the character development. I love the story of a billionaire. The villain is kind of weak, but you gotta start somewhere in terms of villains. So it would take a while before we would get to Loki. So Iron Man, I gotta applaud for giving us the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, real quickly, before we get into the top 14, if you haven't already, be sure to tell me your list in the description box down below. We're all going to disagree, but as long as we have a friendly, nice discussion, I won't block any comments. So, let's get the train going, and let's continue with number 14, which is Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man Far From Home was just as great as the first solo MCU Spider-Man film, and not as many people think so. I do. Seeing Peter Parker hanging out with friends on vacation and having to deal with the events and the loss of Tony Stark in Endgame definitely made the story feel very more interesting as it already is, aside from it not taking place in New York. The direction by John Watts is really entertaining once again. The script definitely still holds of the drama and the humor action sequences all together as its predecessor did. Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio makes for a very interesting villain, as Michael Keaton's Vulture did in the first film. The action sequences here are as not as epictastic as they were in Homecoming, but there are still some very entertaining, memorable action sequences. And feels like more action sequences than the 2012 Mark Webb piece of crap ever did. And I really do love the fact that they decided to go in a different location outside of New York, sort of breaking tradition in the Spider-Man movies. And I love the fact that Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is a really intimidating and dangerous threat to Peter. And the fact that the story takes place in the post-Avengers Endgame war after Tony's death really put a smile on my face, but also saddened me because I'm still not over Tony's death in that movie. Tom Holland once again does a great job as Peter, Spider-Man, and he still has a lot of fun playing this role, and I really dig the red and black suit they gave him as well. Seeing Kobe Smulders get a lot more to do as Maria Hill definitely surprised me, and she still shows why she's a really great underrated character as well as underrated actress in the MCU. Zendaya does a really great job once again as MJ, and I like the scenes with her and Peter. Jacob Batalon, Samuel L. Jackson, and Jon Favreau are all really great once again. The stuff that Peter has to deal with between having fun, expressing his feelings to MJ, dealing with Tony's death, and being the superhero at the same time, you can understand why he wants to take a break from saving the world. And you really have a great score, great special effects, beautiful looking cinematography. Even with the stuff with Mysterio and all the different elementals are really well done, and some very lucrative and creative production design to go along with it. The only downside, however, is that Marissa Tomei once again does a great job as Aunt May, or should I say Aunt MILF. She feels more in the background, and the film does overstay its welcome just a little bit with the runtime, but it's way more shorter than Avengers Endgame, and anything way better handled than last year's Venom. Joker, I hope you take your notes, because I will be seeing you, even though you're already out. Also, it does feel like there's a little too many things going on at times, but it never gets to the point where it becomes overly convoluted or overly complicated as it should or would have been. And it doesn't hurt to grade this movie. So, in the long run, Far From Home lived up to its expectations, and I'm so happy Sony and Marvel worked out their differences to allow him to be in the MCU for 2 more movies and cameos, as well as be in the Sony Marvel universe. So hopefully Venom 2 will learn from your freaking mistakes. So now we're into the top 12. Number 12 is Avengers Infinity War Part 2, or Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame managed to take what could have been an overly complicated movie and finish off its second part to the 2-part MCU adaptation of the Infinity Gauntlet comic book storyline. And in my opinion, it felt more like a finale than X-Men Dark Phoenix ever was. And I said it in my review of that movie, and I'll say it again. When a 3-hour and 2-minute long Avengers movie does a better job at concluding all of its story arcs it's built up to since day one of the MCU, more than an hour and 54-minute long X-Men movie can, there is a problem, because with Dark Phoenix, you're telling a big story to close out the film series that started the modern superhero genre, whereas in this movie, closes out all of his story arcs in an emotionally satisfying way, and at the same time giving us one last hurrah with some of our original Avengers, including Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow and Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. This movie, to me, is still my personal opinion the Deathly Hallows Part 2 of the MCU, and this, for me, is without the shadow of a doubt a freaking masterpiece, and most definitely a very satisfying end to the 2-part Infinity Saga story arc of the MCU. I have to give credit to everyone who worked on this movie. This movie made me appreciate the ending of Avengers Infinity War a lot more, even though I still kind of don't like that ending, but luckily everything gets resolved here. Yes, I do agree, and I do admit we didn't need the first couple minutes, and we could have started with the time travel stuff. But I do appreciate the fact that they gave us time to grieve, even if it became too much for me. I also didn't mind Black Widow's death because there was no way of doing what needs to be done to get the Soul Stone, and it got me emotional. And I do wish she was in that final battle, but the deaths are permanent. And I know there is a shit ton of controversy towards the scene that has hit since release, but I respect the decision, and I don't find it to be sexist or stupid. They had to go this route at some point, people, and I do wish Vision was in that final battle. The acting, the direction, the score, cinematography, screenplay, production design, editing, visual effects, and overall filmmaking aspects are amazing here as always. And the biggest thing that I had to take away from this film is that in order to see the light, you must face the darkness. Or in order to win, you must lose at least once. And that's what the movie did amazingly well. Time travel sling sequences were awesome too, and Stan Lee's last cameo was very emotional. I never hated Nebula from the first time I saw her in Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's great that they gave her a lot more to do, because I love Karen Gillan as an actress and as this character, and she deserves to have a lot more screen time and a lot more to her. And her art makes me feel even bad for her more. I do wish they would have kept the lead scene with Catherine Langford as an adult version of Morgan Stark in, but unfortunately, it's not on the special features for DVD and Blu-ray. But my favorite moment of MCU fan service was definitely the girl power moments, with all of the MCU ladies, including my fan favorite Scarlet Witch, going up against Thanos' crew. And that moment actually made me come up with a new catchphrase I use for awesome moments when I see something in movies and TV shows. And the part where Scarlet Witch goes head to head with Thanos and displaying her full power and nearly killing Thanos. But as they say, when you take everything from a woman, hell have no fear like a woman scorned. And I'm still very much mixed on Tony's death. The more I think about Tony's death scene, the more I process it and I watch the film and even listen to the commentary at this point, there was no other option. And the funeral that they gave for him, with all the MCU being there, it was a great send-off to his character. I still have a few problems with the first hour being a little too talky and slow paced and a little bit too depressing for its own good, just to name one. But none of them took away how great this film was. And as for Captain Marvel herself, Brie Larson once again did a great job here, but I do wish she was in the movie more, and she was a badass in the final act. And come on, how can you not love the line of dialogue she has when she says this?
Hey, Peter Parker. You got something for me?
That line had me laughing, but at the same time, it was kind of sexy. So all in all, Avengers Endgame, while it's not very high in my ranking of the MCU, it is still a masterpiece of a movie and will definitely become a modern day classic movie that people will talk about over and over again. And whether you like the MCU or hate the MCU, you have to at least look back at this film in the 10 years and what this movie has done. At number 11, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes, this is the movie that everyone freaked out over, saying it would be Marvel's first bomb. And it was not Marvel's first bomb. In fact, this was actually really, really freaking awesome. And I was fully supportive of this movie when it was announced and when it came out. But I did see it, and I had a good time with it. James Gunn wrote and directed a very fun movie. This was a very entertaining movie. I thought it was very well done in its execution, in the way of its characters. This was basically a character-driven film with some action in it. And it was kind of like Star Wars of the MCU. The only issue here was the villain was not very memorable, but Lee Pace was still really great. And it was still very entertaining. Bradley Cooper, Zoe Saldana, Chris Pratt, Vin Diesel, Dave Bautista all worked well with each other. Karen Gillan, for her little screen time as Nebula, was really great. The production design and the world of the Guardians of the Galaxy was really great. And everyone loved this movie so much that it actually got them a lot of awesomeness and entertainingness here. So I gotta say, I have to tell you, this was a great experience and this was a great film. I have nothing more to say with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. This is a great film. Now, number 10 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. This definitely delivered on what it set out to do. And the somberness that was, after the somberness that was Infinity War, we needed an MCU movie with some lighthearted fun to it. And that's what Ant-Man and the Wasp definitely is. It's a fun, lighthearted, and entertaining entry in the MCU. Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly work very well together in the scenes that they have with their characters. Evangeline Lilly is definitely the standout as Wasp Hope. And her costume was pretty awesome and pretty sexy to see. And seeing her in action after that little tease at the end of the first movie, in which Hope was set up to be the Wasp. And the direction here is still very strong in the case of Peyton Reed returning to direct. The action sequences are fun and exhilarating to watch, especially when the two title characters go up against our villain. New additions like Lawrence Fishburne, Walton Goggins, and the lovely Michelle Pfeiffer were also very well at it, and they do bring in some awesomeness to the roles. The story was really good, and in my opinion, the thing I enjoy out of the story is the relationship Scott has with his daughter, and that was a very nice father-daughter relationship, because I'm a sucker for father-daughter family relationships. And it's great to see T.I. and Michael Pena again, and Michael Pena again as Luis is still really funny. The issue that does hold Ant-Man and the Wasp back is the Ghost. Now, in the comics, Ghost was a guy. But in this movie, Ghost is a female, which I don't have a problem with. But in terms of the character herself, she could have been interesting, but instead she comes off as a very bland and weak villain for the two titular characters. And it's not the visual effects team's fault. It's not the writer's fault, it's not the director's fault, or costume designer's fault. It's mostly between Hannah John Kamen, or the fact that this is a villain that could have been played by someone else, or or could have just been played by a guy. Because Hannah John Kamen as Ghost feels very out of place. And the fact that she might be coming back to the MCU in this new era of MCU movies is kind of questionable. She's not bad to look at, but there's not much to her in the role of a Ghost. And the backstory for Ghost could have been interesting, but the problem is the Ghost is a villain that definitely leaves a lot to be desired. But at the end of the day, Ant-Man and the Wasp is a fun addition to the MCU and a great successor to Ant-Man. And I'm looking forward to a possible Ant-Man 3 because I do want to see Ant-Man and the Wasp fight together again and possibly seeing an older version of Cassie Lang. And due to the events of Avengers Endgame, anything is possible since they set up a multiverse here. I'd be totally up for it. Coming in number 9 is Captain America Civil War. This was a great end to the Captain America trilogy. It was badass. It was emotional. It was very well done. Seeing Iron Man and Captain America choose sides on what side of the government you should be on. Decide for when they are asked to be called for help or decide what they choose to save the world whenever they want. That was very interesting. I really enjoyed the direction and the writing that is presented into this film. All of the acting was really great from Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. The rest of the cast is no joke either. Scarlett Johansson, Elizabeth Olsen. Great introduction to Tom Holland. It was nice to see Spider-Man get his redemption, especially after those Amazing Spider-Man movies, which honestly, I'll get to those when I do my official Marvel ranking, and that's gonna be work, but I'm willing to get it done. But the villain is quite underrated actually. I don't really hate the villain. The twist, I was not a fan of at first, but I've grown to appreciate the plot twist in Captain America Civil War a lot more than I did at first. It's not the worst plot twist ever, and it's not the worst thing that's ever happened. So I've grown to accept it a lot more the more I rewatch this movie. So all in all, Captain America Civil War, I have nothing more to say about this movie than I've already said in my review back in 2016. So yeah. Yeah, that's all I gotta say on that. Number 8 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming was a return to form that really was welcomed, and I was so happy they decided to learn from their mistakes and give us a proper Spider-Man movie again after the Amazing Spider-Man movies were not too well received. Tom Holland was great in his role as this character. Zendaya, Robert Downey Jr. as the mentor was really great. Marissa Tomei, High as All Hell was great. All of the acting in the movie was great, and I really enjoyed what they were going for. It felt more like a Spider-Man movie again, which is what Spider-Man is supposed to be. He's not supposed to be a freaking Edward Cullen teen angst looking dude. And it's not supposed to be dark and depressing. Spider-Man is a light-hearted character. You can have some dark stories, but don't make them fully dark, which is my biggest problem with those Amazing Spider-Man movies, but I've already reviewed them. And just everything about them, this movie was great. There's not much more I can say about Spider-Man Homecoming that hasn't already been said. Coming in 7th place is Iron Man 3 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Infinity Saga ranking. Iron Man 3 is a film that I still really love to death, but the Mandarin twist really, and I mean it really does hurt the film a bit, and a few members of the supporting cast isn't really that great. But there are still some great things to enjoy in the film. And that's sad because the Mandarin twist could have been an interesting twist, but instead they ruined the whole twist by pulling that twist that the Mandarin is an actor which still to this day, ever since I first watched it on cable back in 2014, pisses me off. And some of the comedy doesn't really work here. Now I get Shane Black and his comedy, and it does feel more like a Shane Black movie at times, but some of the comedy could have really been toned down. And some of the supporting cast here is a little bit of a hit and miss, mostly more hits than misses. Rebecca Hall is not a problem with me. The little kid is not a problem with me. Well, he's not little anymore. And I love Ben Kingsley's performance as the Mandarin. Guy Pearce does a great job as Aldrich Killian, but he could have used a little bit more motivation. But I can say that he's a hell of a lot more tolerable than the Grandmaster in Thor Ragnarok. But there's still a lot of good things to really appreciate here. Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, and Don Cheadle are still really great here. There's definitely a lot of heartbreaking and a lot of intense moments, and the story that Shane Black was going for is definitely interesting with what's happening with Tony after the events of the first Avengers movie. The musical score is really awesome here. A lot of action sequences here are really great. The cinematography is really well done, and the way it ends the Iron Man trilogy is really well done. This movie definitely takes some chances with some big risks taking throughout the film's runtime, and there are some very well done action sequences, especially from the big plane explosion in the second half of the movie. And the fact that Tony is suffering from PTSD after the first Avengers movie was something ballsy and risk taking, something that I do appreciate the MCU for doing. So, not much more to say on Iron Man 3 than that. Or this one for that matter, because there's already enough that's been said. Number 6, Captain America the Winter Soldier. This is easily the best of the Captain America movies ever. We go from Joe Johnston to Anthony and Joe Russo, and we get a very action-packed, fun time, but at the same time, it's also a political thriller, which I didn't really mind because they wanted to try something different with the second movie. Well, and that's why I say, if you're gonna do something, you might want to be different. So, in the long run, it worked. Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, this has the best look of Black Widow. Samuel L. Jackson, the cast was great. I liked Alexander Pierce, played by Robert Redford. The Winter Soldier was also really a fun addition, and so was, of course, Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie, who is now, I guess, the new Captain America, even though he claims that he's still Falcon. But there's a lot that really works here, and if I go on any more, we would be here all day, because this is already a lengthy ranking video as it is, but it's 23 MCU movies, so yeah. Number 5 is The Avengers. What this movie was able to do, like I said, you took characters that we know from a couple first set of MCU movies and put them into one movie for, say, a world protecting movie, but you get the good character development of Joss Whedon and good character development of the Avengers. The only one who doesn't get the most character development, of course, is Hawkeye, but it doesn't really matter to me because Hawkeye, this is still an awesome movie. I pretty much said all I have to say about this. So if I do a top 50, when I do the top 50 superhero movies, hopefully next year I'll just have to think of something else more to say about the Avengers that hasn't already been said. But you know what? If I don't, I will just probably go off of what I said in previous videos, but I don't know. We'll see about that. But number 5 is The Avengers. Number 4. Yes, I know this is going to get a little controversial here, but I don't really care. Captain Marvel deserves to be high on my list personally because it's nowhere near as bad as critics or audiences making it out to be. And people are just overly upset because the film wasn't what they wanted it to be. And to hell with the stupid Brie Larson controversy, which needs to stop because the more I have to hear about it, the more pissed off myself, YouTuber John Avenger 7195, and those who like Captain Marvel and Brie Larson are going to get. Now, don't get me wrong, the problems are still there when it comes to the weak first act of the movie. The very lackluster villain, in which Jude Law does a great job playing. The script's dialogue feeling a little clunky at times, considering the fact you have 5 people writing it, which 5 writers is a little too many for one superhero movie. Some of the MCU being retconned, which isn't a big problem with me as it is with anyone else. A little more development from some of the other characters, including Gemma Chan's Minerva, Clark Gregg's little screen time as a young Agent Coulson, which happens to Nick Fury's eye, doesn't really need to be explained, and more development for Carol herself. But all of those issues doesn't stop this from being a very fun and badass movie. Jude Law is good in the role as John Rock, but you already know that he was going to be the villain from the start of the movie. And he doesn't have much to him, and that could have been easily been fixed. Also, Ronan did not need to be in this movie. As much as I like seeing Lee Pace in the role again, a lot of things that work for me in this movie, in my personal opinion, Brie Larson, sexy as all hell, and a multi-talented woman is perfect as Carol Danvers / Captain Marvel. And I can understand some people saying she's wooden, bland, or boring, but I'd rather take Brie Larson playing this character than someone I don't care for, like Kristen Stewart. Larson has enough personality and heart, and she feels dedicated in the role, in my opinion. I like the origin story they have for her, and while she doesn't have much development for her character, we will be getting more development in the future films, because this is the first in the Captain Marvel series, or trilogy, or franchise. Samuel L. Jackson is really awesome again as a de-aged CGI young Nick Fury. Larson and Jackson have a lot of chemistry together in the scenes where they are trying to figure out Carol's past. Goose the Cat was really fun to watch. The action sequences are very awesome in my opinion, especially the sequences and the scene where Carol goes Super Saiyan was fun to watch. Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden's direction works pretty well for me, at least. The humor, 90s references, soundtrack, production design are all top notch, and I'm interested in seeing more of the Carol Danvers character, especially after this movie and Avengers Endgame. And Brie Larson is basically on her way to being the next Robert Downey Jr. in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this is a good female empowerment movie, people. Unlike What Man Wants, unlike the 2016 Ghostbusters film, and that soon-to-be released reboot of Charlie's Angels next month, which I don't look forward to at all. But Captain Marvel is one of the best MCU movies out there, at least for me, and while it doesn't come close to being a masterpiece or much of a game changer like Wonder Woman did, it at least gave us MCU fans what we've been waiting for. An MCU film with a female lead. And guess what? We're getting another MCU film with female lead next year with Black Widow, and we're getting Wonder Woman 1984. So suck it up, man up, and deal with it. And that's all I have to say about Captain Marvel. Coming in third place is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This movie managed to be just as great as its predecessor in my opinion. You have all the creative team from the first film, James Gunn returning to write and direct, and the entire cast of the first movie with some new additions added to the mix. You easily have yourself a good sequel on your hands. Don't get me wrong, I do understand the valid criticisms of people and why most people who either really liked the first Guardians of the Galaxy or thought it was okay wouldn't enjoy Volume 2 as much as they should, or would have been. But for me, Volume 2 of Guardians of the Galaxy did almost everything right. The only nitpicks I have here is that most of the humor isn't as funny as you think it would be in some areas. Rocket Raccoon, while very fun to watch, he is a bit selfish this time around. Especially considering the thing that goes on with his character taking an artifact from the Golden People, as I'd call them, and some of the soundtrack isn't as good as the first one. But the rest of the stuff here really does work. Palm Clementie's Mantis was a very nice addition to the Guardians of the Galaxy cast, and she was very cute, and she's pretty attractive. And she's not like a comic book counterpart, but she is really great in the role. And I honestly think most of the things Manson says in this movie was really funny. And the actress herself is really cute for a Canadian French Asian actress, and she's really a blessing to watch. And I like the power that they gave her. You do get more moments with Zoe Saldana's Gamora and Karen Gillan's Nebula here, and you start to see the bond of a sisterhood here, which I hope Guardians 3 continues once they do find 2014 Gamora, because the Gamora that Peter knows is gone. Vin Diesel's Baby Groot is just funny, cute, and awesome wrapped up in one. Chris Pratt's Star-Lord is still a joy to watch. The scene where Michael Rooker's Yondu sacrifices himself is really emotional. Kurt Russell's ego is entertaining to watch, especially when you find out the twist that he killed Peter's mother. And I love the romantic chemistry with Zaldana and Pratt. Dave Bautista and Palm Clemente have really good chemistry, and they have some very funny moments together. Same with Bradley Cooper's Rocket Raccoon, and it has a really great opening action sequence. Entire sequence with Baby Groot dancing as they're fighting the giant creature on the planet they're on. Action sequences are personally better than the first film. I don't mind Elizabeth Debicki as Asia, aka the Golden Paris Hilton. A lot of the technical aspects, such as the effects, cinematography work, editing, and musical score by Tyler Bates, and soundtrack choices really stands out. And when are we going to get Howard the Duck in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because he deserves another chance on film. They've been setting him up for 2 of these Guardians of the Galaxy movies now. Not to mention, he had a little cameo in Avengers Endgame, if you look carefully, in the final battle. You blink and you miss it. So overall, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a damn great sequel to the first movie, and I can't wait to see how James Gunn wraps this trilogy up. This trilogy of awesomeness with his third film coming in 2022 or something. That one, they have to go on the search for Gamora, so it's going to be interesting seeing Peter Quill having to start his relationship over with Gamora. Which that leads us now into the top 2, the runner-up, Ant-Man. Ant-Man is exactly what you expect to be. A very small scale, fun MCU film that is very light and very entertaining. Paul Rudd is an excellent choice for Scott Lang, Ant-Man. Evangeline Lilly is great to watch in this movie as Hope Van Dyne. Michael Pena, Michael Douglas, and the rest of the cast is really awesome to watch. Peyton Reed brings a fun and energetic direction to the film. The jokes are really funny as well, and a lot of comedy really works here as well, especially the Baskin Robbins joke. It does suffer from a villain problem in the case of Yellow Jacket, who could have been interesting, but not very well done here. And it's not Corey Stoll's fault because he does try and does a great job here. But it's still a very entertaining entry in the MCU, and it was the movie we needed, especially after Age of Ultron. It does feel a little disjointed in terms of a few moments here and there, and the reason I feel is disjointed is because there are some moments where it felt like Edgar Wright, the original director, before Reed came in and directed the film, but it's not as disjointed as you think it'd be. Overall, Ant-Man was one of the big surprises of 2015, and it was really awesome and deserves to be number 2 on my list. And that leads me into my number 1 favorite MCU movie and my favorite film of this Infinity Saga, and that is Avengers Age of Ultron. Still the most underrated and most hated film in the entire Infinity Saga of the cinematic universe. This is a 2015 awesome sequel to the 2012 awesomeness that Joss Whedon directed and written and proves that you can make a sequel just as awesome as the first movie. The only thing Age of Ultron does suffer from is that it has it does suffer a little bit, and it has a little too much going for it, and it could have used an extra 45 to 50 minutes. But for what we got, Avengers Age of Ultron is still pretty much awesomeness. It gives us a lot more character dynamics of our original 6 core Avengers, like the original film does. Ultron makes for a pretty underrated and intimidating villain, which James Spader does a fantastic job playing the character. Incredible CGI motion capture work for him. Paul Bettany's introduction as the character Vision was an amazing way to bring in a new character to replace Jarvis, who's basically Iron Man's little robot toy. Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye got a lot more development in Age of Ultron, as he did in the first one. And you do have the Hulkbuster sequence with Iron Man and the Hulkbuster after Scarlet Witch kind of possessed Hulk a little bit. Music by Danny Elfman and Brian Tyler is also really amazing here. And all of our cast members do an all-around awesome job in game. It's the Avengers. What can you really expect, basically? And what a nice introduction to Elizabeth Olsen and Scarlet Witch. And the only time until the MCU are reintroduced with the X-Men, this is the only time we'll see Quicksilver, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who both played in the 2014 Godzilla movie. But it's Scarlet Witch who really does shine out the most here, especially when she showcases her powers. Quicksilver's there, he's cool, but it's too bad they have to kill him off. But hopefully we'll see him again once the X-Men is rebooted and reinvented for the MCU, since Marvel has the team and the Fantastic Four back. Those two are a pretty awesome introduction, and yes, I do see why people hate this film. I do understand why people hate it, but the Black Widow and Hulk romance was pretty good. There's a lot of great things in it than bad, and that's why Age of Ultron remains as my favorite MCU movie. It's not as dark as the trailers made it out to be, which is misleading, but it didn't need to be. You save your dark tone and your big bad villain for your final movie. So in the long run, Avengers 2 is still underrated, awesome, and amazing successor to the first Avengers movie, and I think it has become a highly misunderstood superhero film ever since its May 2015 release. Again, there's a lot of people who don't like this movie, and I honestly don't understand why. Sure, it has a lot going on. Sure, it has a lot of stuff for what's to come in Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but this is not an overly complicated nor convoluted film as Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End was. Well, I don't know how long this ranking is going on, but if you are one of those people who sat through all of it, good for you. If you're one of those people who has to watch this in parts, good for you as well. But let me know what you guys think of this ranking down below. How would you rank the first 23 films of the Infinity Saga era from the worst to the best? Which one you love, which one you hate, which one are you mixed with? And I'll see you guys in more rankings, in more videos. Be sure to follow all my social media links to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Stardust, Letterboxd, and my merchandise store. You can check that out. Check out my official website. You guys keep it cool and join the Epictasticness. Bye bye.